Hey guys, what's up? Back from vacation, back in LA, back to the grind, back with a rant video here on the channel. Bear with me, I'm a little rusty from being with family for a week in Detroit and eating and drinking nonstop. So I'm still kind of in recovery mode and catching up on everything. But there were two big cards last Saturday, right? Here in the USA. We had the East Coast card and the West Coast card. They were both triple headers. One was on premium cable, one was on free network television. And just catching up this week on all the Twitter back and forth and some of the podcasts and the shows and all that. I haven't seen all the fights yet. I've seen highlights packages. You know, I've heard pretty good breakdowns of the fights from people I trust and everything. I know all the stats and numbers. But on Twitter, the social media stuff and all the shows, regarding the ratings of these cards and what took place in the ring and the purses and all that, you know, you're getting the same narratives you always get. The PBC pom-pom waivers are kind of going one way with a narrative, and the HBO guys are going a different way. So I just wanted to touch real quick on the ratings here, because to me, this just says a lot. All right, with the PBC on Fox, triple header. And some people out there actually like this triple header. I thought it was shit, top to bottom. And, you know, look, I've given PBC credit when they get something right. I thought this card, top to bottom, was a complete disaster, just a clusterfuck. But Omar Figueroa, Robert Guerrero, neither one of those guys has fought this year. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Omar Figueroa hasn't fought, I think, since 2015. You had Marcus Brown and Sean Monahan, two guys from New York. That fight somewhat made sense. But Monahan was making his 2017 debut, I do believe. You had Adam Kownacki and Arthur Szpilka. And I think Szpilka was making his 2017 debut. So you had four fighters on this card that were making their debut for 2017. It was just kind of this haphazard card put together. This was on Fox. This aired prime time, 8 to 10 p.m. on the East Coast. And then, of course, it was replayed in the other regions. But 8 to 10 p.m. on Saturday. And this did the worst ratings ever for PBC on Fox. The average viewership was 886,000. And the peak viewership was just over 1 million. I think like 1.1 million or so. It was the fewest viewers of any network TV program that night on television, on any of the regular networks. Right? I'm not talking about cable. I'm just talking about regular networks. So all things considered, you know, yeah, it makes sense, right? That rating was so poor. Again, I mentioned 4 of the 6 fighters, and correct me if I'm wrong on that, making their 2017 debut. Several of them were coming off of losses. I know Guerrero was coming off a loss. I know Szpilka was. You know, with Figueroa, he may as well have been coming off a loss. He hasn't fought in so long. You had 4 Americans on this card. One is actually 5, you can maybe say, because Adam Kownacki was born in Poland, but he's American now, and he's based in Brooklyn. So, you know, it kind of made sense for him to be on that card. 2 Polish guys fighting heavyweights. With 4 Americans and a heavyweight fight, and you're on Fox. Guys, just to put it into perspective, there are about 120 million homes in America with televisions, okay? That equates to a little over 300 million people that are over 2 years old. Nielsen ratings, when they start breaking all that down, they only consider TV viewers anybody over 2 years old. Don't ask me why it's 2 years old, but that's what it is. So 120 million homes, about 300 million people. You can't even do an average of 1 million. That's mind-boggling, right? I mean, you're talking about a fraction of a percent during your peak for this fight card, a triple header. And again, you know, Robert Guerrero, yeah, hasn't fought in a while. He's been on a losing streak. I think he's lost like 4 of his last 6 or 5 of his last 7 now, something like that. But he's fought Floyd Mayweather. He's fought on PBC shows multiple times. I think of any of the fighters in PBC, he benefited the most from this whole deal. And he announced his retirement after this fight because he looked so bad against Figueroa. Hood's, you know, didn't look good himself, but I think it's clear that the ghost is finished. So it was right for him to bow out. But with a name, quote unquote, like Guerrero,
a heavyweight fight. And 3 of these 6 guys were based in New York. One of them New York City, 2 of them, I think one was in Staten Island. That's Marcus Brown, and Sean Monahan's from Long Island. So you had 3 guys from the area. All those things, all that combined, even with the Figueroa's from Texas, Guerrero's from California. I mean, yeah, it's haphazard. It doesn't make sense. But you would think they could do over 1 million. They could average over 1 million. They didn't. And some people will say, well, it's because of the HBO show. But what they're not telling you is the HBO tripleheader that night overlapped with this PBC on Fox card for only about 20 minutes. It was, I know it was less than half an hour. So it's not like they were going head to head. I think the West Coast card started a little bit later. So let's talk about that one. You had Miguel Berchelt versus Takashi Miura. You had Jezreel Corrales versus Robinson Castellanos. You had Joe Smith Jr. versus Sullivan Barrera. Triple header. Now, this did an average, I believe, the entire card. Well, let's talk about the main event. Did an average of 683,000, a peak of 729. You look at the second fight between Corrales and Castellanos, did an average of 629, a peak of 694. And then the opener, the light heavyweight fight, did an average of 617, a peak of 719. So what I find interesting here is you had pretty level viewership throughout. There wasn't a whole lot of variation between the lowest average, the opening fight, 617K, and the peak during the main event, 729K. It's only about 100,000. So people that tuned into this card tuned into the whole thing. There wasn't a whole lot of fluctuation. But when you take into consideration that there was only 1 American on this card, there was 1 light heavyweight fight and 2 130-pound fights. And American sports fans are obsessed with size. The bigger weight divisions always get more love. You had a Mexican versus a Japanese guy. You had a Panamanian versus a Mexican journeyman, on paper at least. And then you had an American versus a Cuban. All that. And this card, when you look at percentages, not only did it outperform the PBC on Fox card, because HBO is in about 35 million homes. So it's in about 1/3 of the homes that Fox is available in. And it's premium. You got to pay for it, right? And they're not streaming anything live. HBO doesn't stream cards live like Showtime does. All that, and they still do almost as much average and almost as much peak. They're only about 200,000 to 300,000 off of what PBC on Fox did. Not just that. When Berchelt fought Francisco Vargas and Takashi Miura fought, I think it was Miguel Roman, earlier this year, January 28th on HBO, I think the peak for that whole card was 549,000, and it averaged about 497. I think the main event averaged 497,000. So there was a huge increase. There was an increase in viewership. And yes, that card back on January 28th was going head-to-head against the rematch on Showtime between Leo Santa Cruz and Carl Frampton. They were going head-to-head. It did affect viewership, yes. But you weren't going head-to-head quite with this PBC on Fox card this weekend, HBO. The schedules were slightly off. But in terms of boxing, there was another card that night. It was going head-to-head against. And this time, Berchelt, Miura, their viewership versus January went up. The percentages, I don't know, off the top of my head, 30% or so, right? So how does that happen? Why is one card getting 2 or 3% of the viewership of the platform it's on, and the other card's getting a fraction of a percent? Well, for all the things I mentioned below, before, but also the fact that January 28th card, Berchelt, Miura fought. I think Miura fought in the co-main and Berchelt fought in the main event. But right there, when those two won on January 28th, it was pretty much announced right then and there that they were going to face each other. They just had to work out the logistics of it. It should have happened a little sooner. I think it would have been better if it happened around April, May. Happened a little late for my taste. And it probably should have been at a venue like StubHub or something. And I don't know, maybe StubHub was busy. I can't remember off the top of my head. But all things considered, they built something there. There's a storyline. They built something. Robinson Castellanos, he won against Yuriorkis Gamboa on ESPN, I think it was, on a Friday night card before the Canelo Chavez fight. back in May, and that was the storyline there. He came into this fight against Corrales, and look, that fight was kind of just a filler, right? But still, there was a little bit of momentum there because Castellanos had fought just a couple months ago on ESPN, and viewers that were going to tune in for that tuned into that ESPN card, they saw him. So when they saw he was on this card, boom, there was interest there. Mexican guy fighting in Los Angeles too, Mexican-American crowd, Mexican in the headliner Saturday. That fight made sense. And then Joe Smith, Sullivan Barrera. Now, Sullivan Barrera just won earlier this year. He's been busy since he fought Andre Ward last year and lost, but he went 12 rounds with Ward. Joe Smith was the breakthrough fighter last year, had a couple of big wins, and basically ended Bernard Hopkins' career. Joe Smith should have fought probably around March or April. You know, his promotions, his people screwed up. They should have had him fighting. And in truth, we should have seen Joe Smith's people and we should have seen Sean Monahan's people with the PBC work together and put on a show for them in Long Island probably around March or April. That would have made sense. And then you could have had these two separate cards this weekend. That didn't happen, so both promotions there screwed up. But all things considered, all of these guys I'm talking about, Berchelt, Miura, Joe Smith, Sullivan Barrera, they've all fought on HBO within the last year or so. A couple of them, you know, multiple times. So there is a storyline built there. People that do subscribe to HBO for boxing, which is a smaller and smaller percentage of people, they've seen these fighters, right? They know the names, they know the faces. There's something being built there. And now with Berchelt, who just came off this win, now you got Berchelt versus Corrales. That's a no-brainer. I think you're going to see Berchelt versus Corrales. Maybe not this year. It might be early next year. But when it does happen, they're going to unify titles. Meanwhile, you've got other fighters in that hot division staying active as well. You got Vasily Lomachenko fighting next month. Yeah, that's on ESPN. But Top Rank isn't necessarily finished doing business with HBO forever. Maybe something down the line can be worked out to unify all those belts. Either way, people who tuned into this card, if Berchelt and Corrales fight later this year, early next year, you have to figure that the viewership here, which was anywhere from 600,000 to 700,000, that will bump up that much more. People are going to be interested. You're building a storyline. Now, on the PBC on Fox card, there's no fucking storyline. You have guys who have fought all over the place on various networks. You have several coming off losses who haven't fought in a year or more. You have guys from all over the place. So there's just no cohesion. There's no storylines being built that fans can latch themselves to. Even if it's a casual fan, a diehard fan, whatever. These guys have been all over the place, right? So that's why you're seeing such a difference in ratings. I think it's a miracle that PBC on Fox averaged 886,000. I think that's a miracle considering. And really the only explanation I have is because it wasn't going up against many other sports. College football isn't in right now, college basketball. You're pretty much going up against baseball and maybe some auto racing or some shit. That's it. So all things considered, man, it's pretty crazy. Like they should have did more with that. But when you don't build something, when you don't have any consistency and zero promotion, that's what happens. Now, I don't know all the details about this, but I saw or heard some things where apparently Dan Rafael at ESPN tweeted out the purses for the PBC on Fox card and kind of interjected a joke or a slight diss to what the guys are being paid. Robert Guerrero has made a lot more. Figueroa has made a lot more in other fights. The guys like Marcus Brown, Sean Monahan, they were probably getting paid right around where they always do. But Guerrero, Figueroa were definitely being paid a little bit less. They were still overpaid for what they put up last Saturday. But I think I haven't even seen the tweets. I've just heard about it from several different people, and I've seen tweets talking about it back and forth. That apparently Dan Rafael kind of dissed the purses and kind of made a comment of, well, the PBC guys ain't getting paid what they used to. And some people took issue with that. And then some people brought up the fact that, well, the PBC fighters on this card got paid more than the people on the HBO card. And some people thought that, well, look, Dan Rafael looks ridiculous because he's dissing the PBC fighters, but he's not saying anything about the HBO fighters being paid less. I don't know what the hell Rafael tweeted. I don't know if he mentioned the HBO guys' purses. I'm not going to go over all the individual purses for the fighters. I will say this much. Top to bottom, okay, for the three main fights, the PBC and Fox guys did get paid more than the guys on HBO. But my question is, so fucking what? And any of you guys who know how these deals are structured, you know that the PBC, Al Heyman, he puts in certain guarantees for fighters, and that's why his guys don't fight much, because he can't justify paying them their guarantees, and that's why a lot of them sit on the shelf for so damn long. Another thing here is, again, with the PBC on Fox card, you had welterweights, light heavyweights, and heavyweights. The higher you go up in weight, generally, the more money fighters get paid. Also, again, you had four and a half Americans there, right? On the HBO card, you had only one American. You had two little guy fights, 130 pounders, who normally don't make shit, in one light heavyweight fight. And the light heavyweights got paid fairly well. So, top to bottom, you know, comparing the purses, I just, so many fans get caught up in this shit. And so many fans with YouTube channels that call themselves media go back and forth fighting over this stuff and trying to justify whose side is better. And, you know, should a guy like Dan Rafael make a joke or even be talking about purses? I don't know, man. Again, I can't really say until I've seen all the tweets. I'll say this much. The PBC guys are making less than what they were before. And I've talked about this numerous times. They've slashed and cut what they're spending on cards as far as their budgeting. Guys, there used to be private drivers. I saw it. I went to events. I've covered. When I talk about PBC stuff and I'm critical, I'm not coming at this shit from out of my ass. I've covered over a dozen PBC events now in and around Los Angeles. And I've done that because I want to be able to talk to you guys from a place of personal experience, not necessarily just what I heard from somebody. I can tell you, I've gone to luncheons, I've gone to just weigh-ins, fan fests and stuff like that. They are slashing the hell out of their prices, or not prices, their spending from the first year. They were going way all out. Just look at the commentators they had with some of those early cards. And now you look at who they have calling some of these fights now. Look at how many of their big fights they've pushed to Showtime because they're getting paid there. And a lot of the stuff that's on regular TV these days is going to like Fox Sports 1. That's the only really consistent brand they have right now, those Tuesday night Fox Sports 1 cards. Now, I'm not saying any of this to like put them down. I'm just telling you the reality of it. Dan Rafael wasn't being out of his mind when he said what he said about the purses. I don't think he should have interjected a diss if he really did that, and I'll have to look at the tweets to see if he did that. But he wasn't lying. And the purses match up. I mean, the guys on HBO are smaller fighters, they're foreign fighters, there's a different deal there. And you guys look at the purses that are reported here in America. You got a Panamanian like Jazriel Corrales, you have Mexicans like Miguel Berchelt, you have Japanese, Takashi Miura. These guys are getting foreign money as well. That's not reported with the Athletic Commission here in California. There's an American promoter putting it on. There were some foreign promoters as well, obviously. But there's a certain rate being paid here, and then there's foreign TV money, sponsorships, all that other stuff. And all that, that's off the books here. We don't know what that is, right? We can only estimate. So when you see a foreign-based fighter's purse announced somewhere, released by an athletic commission, just keep in mind that's really only a piece of what they're getting. There's foreign money involved as well. So all the purse stuff, does it really matter? What matters more than any of that to me is the ratings. The ratings say more. The action in the ring obviously matters because that makes us want to see these guys again or not. But it's the ratings that really, really matter. And when you do the math, when you look at the number of homes HBO is in versus Fox, when you do the math on what these cards did, and then you factor in all the other stuff I talked about, American versus not American, size, right? The bigger guys always get more love. Americans always get more love in America than foreign fighters. On and on I can go here. The HBO card smoked the PBC card. It's not like it was a first round knockout, but it was a clear win. It wasn't even close. And all things being considered, The HBO card underwhelmed a little bit. It wasn't as good as we thought it was going to be. Joe Smith Jr. fought 9 rounds with a broken jaw, and Sullivan Barrera, you know, as much heart as Joe Smith showed, Sullivan Barrera dominated that fight. I thought Corrales Castellanos was pretty entertaining from what I saw. A lot of people felt that the scorecards were bad. From what I've heard from people that were there ringside, they thought the judges got it right. Berchelt Miura wasn't a barn burner, but again, Berchelt showed that he's a young lion that's going to be a force to be reckoned with. I think he beats Corrales when they fight, but that fight, that matchup is only going to make him better and further season him. So there's a lot of good stuff there. And Sullivan Barrera is probably the second best light heavyweight in the world right now. He's at least in the top 3 or 4. So all that stuff you got accomplished there, good. Now you look at the PBC card. The headline fight meant absolutely nothing. Omar Figueroa is not a player at welterweight. He's a part-time boxer, full-time party animal. He's, you know, basically Adrian Broner without the pizzazz. Then you've got the heavyweight fight between the 2 Polish guys. Kalnacki, is he going to do anything? Is he going to challenge for a title? It's possible he's going to fight Deontay Wilder. I wouldn't rule it out. Does he stand any more of a chance than Szpilka stood? I don't think so. And then Marcus Brown, Sean Monahan. We knew Marcus Brown was going to beat Sean Monahan. I thought he looked good in this fight. Perfect matchmaking for him. But do you put Marcus Brown anywhere near the level of a Sullivan Barrera or even a Joe Smith? No. You know, is he ready for a guy like Kovalev or Stevenson? No. Did this do anything to help build him up? Probably not. But good solid win by him. But that was the highlight of that card. So, look, this is just me keeping it real. I haven't ranted in a while, just getting back into the groove of things. But all the noise I'm hearing, typical noise about PBC this, HBO that, and the back and forth, guys, just top to bottom, I gave you every freaking reason why HBO won this weekend. And I'm not being an HBO homer or anything like that. And I'd be the first to tell you if PBC kicked HBO's ass, because I've talked about it before. Go back and watch some of my videos from the first quarter of this year when PBC was destroying HBO. And I was very, very adamant about that. Not last Saturday.